So following on from last week's debate where I was talking about, the illogical Nuremberg defense that some customer service people come out, the thing I wanted to talk about this time was some of the other illogical arguments that you might run into, and one of them is called Whataboutism, and this is something that you used to see a lot from the Russians and the Soviets. And what basically the argument was if you have done something wrong and somebody's calling you out on it, instead of trying to defend yourself, you say, well, what about, and you come up with some deflection of what somebody else has done. And we're seeing a lot of this right now from the Trump administration south of the border, where Trump does something wrong, somebody calls him out on it, and then the next thing they say is, well, what about Hillary Clinton? What about Obama? What about something else? They're not actually fixing the allegation against them of what they've done wrong, but it's an interesting argument to see the deflection where the idea is it's what about somebody else. And so what you're trying to do is use somebody else's wrongdoing or perceived wrongdoing in order to deflect away from your own wrongdoing without actually proving that what you did was right. So of course this is a logical fallacy. And there's a number of these around. Like, people need to be very careful about making sure that they're not caught out when people are coming up with illogical arguments, because people can get bowled over by this. As a example, imagine you've got two identical cars. One is red, one is white, and they're identical in every perceivable way, shape, size. The only difference between the two is color. And imagine they have a race. Which car would win? Would it be the red car or the white car? Now, I remember many years ago I used this example to bamboozle a person, and I think I won the argument, and it was based on the fact that if a car is red, it's more likely to absorb solar radiation than a white car, which would reflect more of it. Therefore, the red car becomes lighter as it gets hotter, and therefore it would win. Now, of course, this is totally discounting the fact that the white car, if it's heavier, it's actually going to have more grip, and this is why F1 cars, 150 mile an hour, have 1,600 kilos of downforce. So, if you sort of pick and choose your arguments, you can make a really silly argument sound plausible. As an extreme example of this, here's one to run by, this would work on a kid probably, it wouldn't work on an adult, but it's a perfect example of how ridiculous logic can get. If you hang a red t-shirt up in the window, leave it there for 6 months. It's not going to be red after 6 months. It's going to be a funny pink color. And why is it pink? Well, because the solar radiation and UV light and everything else that's hitting the fibers of the fabric is breaking down its ability to be able to reflect light back in the way that it was when it was originally red. So you can now take this a little bit further and say, well, what happens if, let's say, I leave that there for 1 million years? Would it actually stop reflecting all light and become invisible? Well, of course, as an adult, that it would probably disintegrate long before that. But, you could argue that, if this process continues, eventually it will stop reflecting all light and absorbing any light, and therefore it would become perceivably invisible. And then you can take this argument one step further and say, well, how long ago did the dinosaurs exist? It was 65 million years ago. So maybe they haven't actually died out. Maybe we just can't see them because they no longer reflect light. Now, as I said, this will probably work on a 5-year-old. It definitely wouldn't work on any kid older than that. But it's a perfect example of how you can take really illogical logic and try to put a spin on it that actually makes it sound somewhat plausible. So I just want to leave you with that for today, because it is a perfect example of how people's logic can be skewed to their own benefit to convince you of something, even though when you look at it with a rational brain, it's actually totally illogical. So anyway, that's where I want to leave it, and thanks very much. Bye.